Medications which are not being studied because of the restrictions placed on researching illegal drugs. Well, this report is from our science correspondent, Palab Ghosh.
This is a brain scan of someone who's taken magic mushrooms. The blue shows areas of reduced activity. In this state, they're hallucinating and feeling euphoric. In one of the few scientific studies into their effects, researchers have found that they could potentially be used to treat depression.
There's a network in the brain associated with the ego, and that seems to be overactive in depression. And we found with the active component of magic mushrooms that there's actually a decrease in activity in that network. And so that implies that the active components of magic mushrooms could be an effective treatment for depression.
Magic mushrooms are taken by some people for fun, but it's illegal. The scientists here would like to see more research into the effects of magic mushrooms and other mind-altering drugs, such as ecstasy and LSD. They believe that such studies could lead to the development of new medicines to help treat mental disorders. The research has been led by Professor David Nutt, who was controversially sacked from his government advisory role for saying that alcohol and tobacco were more dangerous than LSD and ecstasy. He's now saying that government regulations are holding back important research.
We need to remember that when these drugs were first discovered in the 40s and 50s, there was a huge amount of research done on them to try to use them for psychotherapy, to help people deal with problems like depression, anxiety, cancer. And then kids started using them, and the government of the West banned them. And then for the last 40 years, no one has been able to research these fields.
But some experts say that the unsupervised use of recreational drugs could be psychologically damaging to those who have mental problems. And the Home Office say that safeguards are needed to ensure that psychedelic drugs in laboratories are properly used for legitimate research. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
OK, well, Mariam is with us now for some business news.
Outlined today, but there will still be prison terms for anyone who deals drugs to teenagers or is involved in large-scale production of trafficking. Well, joining me now is Sir Richard Branson, who has been giving evidence to the Commons this morning as the Home Affairs Select Committee launches its inquiry into drug abuse. He has a role with the Global Commission on Drug Policy. Welcome to you indeed. Your message and the message of the Commission is what exactly? Decriminalise illicit use of drugs?
Our message is that drugs should be treated as a health problem, not a criminal problem, and that actually the Department of Health should be overseeing drugs, not the Home Office, and that has proven very successful in other countries. So Portugal, 10 years ago, decided that they were not going to send anybody to prison for taking drugs. As a result, the amount of drug usage has dropped dramatically.
Now, what is the argument? That drugs aren't bad for you or aren't bad for you compared to other things which are legal, like alcohol and smoking, or that criminalising them creates crime, effectively?
Some drugs are very bad for you, and weaker drugs taken in excess are very bad for you. But what it's been proven in Portugal is that if you treat drugs as a health problem and you help your brother, your sister, or your children that have got a problem, that you can wean them off drugs. If you actually send them to prison, or if you give them a big fine and they therefore can't go and get jobs because they've got a fine, etc., it just sets them back in society.
But I mean, does it matter if more people take drugs because they're more freely available?
You ideally don't want to have more people, drinking alcohol, taking cigarettes, or taking drugs. You want to do everything you can to advise people of the dangers of drugs. But by not giving 100,000 people a year a criminal record in the UK, that can be proven to be good for society, and it means that if somebody needs a heroin fix, if there's a place they can go to get clean needles and to get methadone treatment, it's much more likely that they're going to be weaned off heroin than if they have to go underground to get their drugs.
And do you believe, or does the research suggest that if you did decriminalise, there would be an increase in drug use?
A dramatic decrease. So in Portugal, 50% of heroin users who have now stopped being heroin users. So, and they had a big heroin problem 10 years ago. a big decrease in other drugs as well. The fact that not one person is in prison has saved society a lot of money. The amount of break-ins to people's homes has dropped absolutely dramatically, because the principal reason that people are broken into in their homes is from people trying to get their drug fixes.
I mean, why would drug use go down if it was no longer illegal to have them?
Because if you're not frightened of going to prison and you're willing to admit that you've got a problem, in the same way that you admit you've got an alcohol problem, then you can be helped. And in clinics, it is much cheaper to help people than in a prison.
And perhaps, I mean, as with prohibition in the United States, less incentive to encourage people to take drugs to a certain extent.
Yes, I mean, prohibition in America resulted in enormous underworld of crime, and the underworld today gets $300 million a year, $300 billion a year from selling drugs, and that's not good for society to have such a strong underworld.
I mean, if drugs were legal, what do you think the market would be worth globally? I mean, nothing like 300 billion, presumably.
Oh, I think it would be worth. I don't know what it would be worth, but I mean, I think the chances of all drugs ever being legal, I'm not sure that is likely. But there's a big difference between decriminalising and making something legal. By decriminalising, you're just simply saying we're not going to make criminals out of people who take drugs. Now, as far as cannabis is concerned, there are 3 to 5 million people every year that take cannabis. Possibly cannabis should be regulated and taxed.
Do you think this is still an issue which is kind of a sort of cultural divide, in as much as, I suppose you will be seen as the king of the counterculture to a certain extent, and there are all the MPs in their suits, even the women and the young ones, or is the whole question of drug abuse now becoming more commonly understood?
If you talk to any individual MP or anybody in position of power, they know that the current system does not work. So it's just a matter of whether they have the political will to push it through. Now, I think the public is moving, and I think that actually, that it will not be an unpopular thing to do, to actually say, we will treat drugs as a health problem, not a criminal problem. We're going to help our brothers and sisters and children who've got a problem in drugs. We're going to help wean them off.
I mean, and yet, even when you talk about cannabis, attempts to reduce its classification have tended to lead to a big kind of media and public backlash against whatever government proposes there.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 kinds of cannabis. There's marijuana, which is been proven to be less harmful than alcohol, and then the skunk, which is more harmful than alcohol, so it's important that if you do decriminalise, you can educate people much more openly about the pros and cons of different drugs.
And again, another thing which is often said on marijuana is that the Dutch, for example, with their famous cafes and all that, now regret that experiment and are in fact introducing restrictions again.
No, I think you'll find that all countries that have, like Switzerland, Germany, Portugal and Holland, who've moved their policies forward, they regret very little. Holland didn't like it when they were the only people doing it, because everybody from all over the world, poured into their country. But now there are more countries liberalising. I don't think any of them will switch the clock backwards.
You are also moving into banking.